I like to place more mics on an instrument during tracking than I think I'll need. This gives me more mix options later because I have more sounds to choose from or blend together. It's hard to tell what tonal sound I need from the guitar for my mix, so by increasing my options, I'm able to have more freedom over my end sound.
Now we're going to place two cardioid mics on the acoustic guitar. For this, two small diaphragm condenser mics will work great, though one should be fine. A cardioid mic works well because it captures all the sound in front of it while rejecting any sound from behind it. Most often, any sound coming from directly behind the mic is a reflection, although sometimes it's another instrument. By rejecting that sound, or rather reducing it to such a low volume that it's virtually unnoticeable, we're able to capture just the direct sound from the guitar.
Condenser mics will work better than dynamic mics because they capture high frequencies better than dynamic mics. The capsule inside of the mic of a condenser is much more sensitive than the capsule of a dynamic mic, which means it picks up brighter, quieter sounds better. Dynamic mics are great for loud instruments and live scenarios, but for acoustic instruments in the studio, condenser mics tend to be a little better. A ribbon mic would be pretty good as well. Like condensers, they're much more sensitive to high frequencies, but they also have a nice way of rounding off the top end, giving a rich full sound without sounding too crisp or brittle. However, ribbon mics are mostly figure-8 patterns, meaning they reject sound from the sides instead of the very back, so our mic positioning would be a bit different. If you have access to a ribbon mic, go ahead and try it out and see if it's appropriate for your sound. But for us today, I'm sticking with these small diaphragm condensers. We've got a Neumann KM84 pointed towards the 12th fret and a Neumann KM184 pointed towards the bridge.
Next, since we are using two mics, we need to check the phase relationship between them. When multiple mics are placed on the same sound source, phase can often be problematic. The sound emanating from the guitar reaches each mic at a different time, and depending on this relationship, our recording will either be in or out of phase. Ideally, if both of our waveforms are moving up and down at the same time, they are phase coherent. If the crest of one coincides with the trough of the other, frequencies are subtracted from the sound, meaning they are not phase coherent. This changes our tone, making our sound thinner or weaker. So, whenever you're placing multiple mics on one sound source, make sure to check the phase relationship between all of them. To do this, press the phase button on your preamp, or if you don't have one, insert an EQ plugin with the phase button on your channel in your DAW. Flip the polarity on one of the mics and then switch it back again. Whichever setting sounds the fullest, or has the most low frequency content, is probably the correct setting.
Next, A/B or compare the sound between the individual mics and their sound when added together. Does it still sound full when both mics are added together, or does it sound like you're missing something? If so, try moving one or both of the mics. Tracking can be a long and tedious process, but getting all of your sound elements accurate from the beginning will save you tons of time and heartache in the future.
We're listening for a nice balance between the boomy low end coming from the bridge area of the guitar and the bright string sound coming from around the 12th fret. We should hear the richness of the guitar, but the sound should also have clarity and definition.
What's great about the acoustic guitar is you can get such a variety of sound depending on where you place your mic. But since this guitar will be the foundation of our mix, I really want the mic to be in a spot that captures its full sonic potential. So balance between high and low end is key. This is important. Make sure your mic selection and your mic placement is giving you the sound you're wanting. Too many people fall into the trap of thinking they can solve tonal issues in the mix using EQ. While this is partially true, nothing will get you that professional sound like taking care of major tonal issues from the start.
Again, as in Lesson 1, I'll set my preamp at a level where I can capture the full dynamic range of the guitar without peaking or distorting, and I'll set my compressor to contain just the loudest strums of the guitar. Now, one of the most exciting things about a sound or sounds is that they usually start off loud and then get quiet. That might not seem like a remarkable thing, but try overcompressing an instrument. What you do is remove all the dynamics from it. Now, instead of starting loud and getting quiet, you just have loud. your sound becomes flat and boring, lacking any dimension at all. The goal is to have a nice, even guitar sound that still maintains its original depth and dimension. I'm running through the APIs again, then sending my signal through the Empirical Labs distressors, which are compressors. You can find these used for around $1,000 if you're lucky. Distressors have a unique feature called opto mode, where they can mimic the sound of an optical compressor. In opto mode, I have the ratio set to 10:1, attack set to 10, and release set to 0. Then I use my input knob to decide how much compression I want to apply, and my output knob to determine how much volume I want to send back to my DAW. I have also enabled the band emphasis function, which makes the compressor more sensitive to high, mid frequencies that can add a harshness to the sound.
Lowering these frequencies now helps us attain a smooth, even sound to work with later. This particular function is again unique to the distressors and can also be accomplished later with EQ in your mix. You might be wondering how you'll be able to accomplish this same sound at home without all this professional, expensive outboard gear available to you. Well, if you're not working with good musicians and good instruments, or even have a good song for that matter, all of the fancy gear in the world isn't going to salvage your recording. Put your biggest investment into good mics and good preamps and work with good musicians playing good instruments. The rest depends on your ear. Next, let's start by recording our first pass. For better accuracy, Jackson will record to a metronome, which is what we call the click track. This will keep his tempo consistent, making it easier to layer more parts in later and easier to edit. Find a click track sound that the musician is comfortable with. Note, be careful with click tracks. They can easily sneak their way into your recording by bleeding through the headphones. You're looking for the best compromise between the performer hearing the click and the click not bleeding into your mic. Finally, pay attention to the performance. As soon as the final strum is played, mute the click. There's nothing worse than having a click track bleed into the decay.
Jackson, record the first pass. Now let's record the second pass, but before we do, I'll pan the first pass to the left and the new pass to the right. This lets me hear each performance separately between the two speakers, making finding any discrepancies between the two passes easier to identify. Let's record the second pass.
The objective is to have two almost identical takes. This creates a neat chorused stereo sound. The small differences between the two takes is what makes this technique work. Sometimes you'll want a flawlessly identical second take. Other times you'll be happy with more variation between the two. It just depends on the overall feel of the song. However, if you're thinking of just duplicating the first track and panning the two, it will not get you the same effect. Instead, you'll be left with the same mono sound you just started with, just slightly louder. Running a sound through two speakers doesn't make the sound stereo. Running different sounds through two speakers makes it stereo.